I know self-publishing's not for everyone. Nothing is. But if you've considered self-publishing for even a minute, listen up, because I'm betting I know what's holding you back from exploring it further or getting started. Number one, you think the self-publishing process is a lot harder than it actually is. And number two, you're understandably afraid of doing it, air quote, wrong. So I've created a new free resource for you. It's called the Self-Publishing Starter Kit, and you can get instant access to it by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting publishaprofitablebook.com/self-publishing 101. In this free training, you'll discover the exact 4 steps to focus on and mistakes to avoid so you can publish an incredible book that's indistinguishable in quality from a New York Times bestseller without overthinking, overguessing, or overspending in areas that won't make a difference. Again, visit publishaprofitablebook.com/self-publishing 101 to get instant access. Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 6-time author and book editor, and I help people write and publish powerful, thought-provoking, wildly entertaining books without any more overthinking, second-guessing, or overwhelm than absolutely necessary. Because let's face it, some overthinking, second-guessing, and overwhelm is going to come with the territory if you're anything like me. I believe that story and shared perspective are 2 of the most potent ways we connect with one another, and that your story, perspective, and insights are destined to become someone else's favorite resource or pastime. For more book writing and publishing tips and solutions, and plenty of free and low-cost resources, visit publishaprofitablebook.com. And for recommendations of fabulous books you've possibly never heard of, book writing inspiration, and the occasional meme so relatable you'll wonder if it was created with you in mind, follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth Lyons Author. I feel like I've heard a lot of people say, the more you know, and then they don't finish that statement. It's like a throwaway, like, well, the more you know. So the way I finish that statement is, the more you know, the simpler things get. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. But when we're talking about book publishing, I really do believe that the more you know, the simpler things get in terms of your expectations. One of the things that I really strive to do on this podcast is help people see a whole bunch of different experiences. Even if someone has traditionally published, they can only speak to their experience with their publishing house. And if you want to go even niche down even further, their editor, their month of publication, their marketing situation. You can't pile it all on top of everything and say, well, I've traditionally published, so now I can tell you unequivocally how traditional publishing works. And the same is true of hybrid publishing and of self-publishing. So I love to talk to people who have experiences where maybe we only hear the front end of it. And this interview is no exception. You're not going to want to miss a minute of this. Diana Naranjo was introduced to me by, of course, Neely Alexander. Diana's memoir, which is currently on submission, and she's going to tell the whole story, so I'm not really going to lead into it too much, but suffice it to say, it came out of the gate with a lot of interest from agents. And a lot of that upfront activity came because she has a professional connection. She is a professor of psychology at Stanford. She's a clinical psychologist. And she has a professional relationship with a well-known, incredible author by the name of Abraham Verghese. And if you are not familiar with Abraham, you're going to want to run to get your hands on The Covenant of Water and then Cutting for Stone, or the opposite order. It doesn't matter. You're just going to want to read both of them. But she had this professional connection, and so it did open a few doors for her early on. But she's going to tell you the story of how those connections actually ended up panning out and where she is now in the process and her experience. And again, it's just her experience. Just because you get an agent doesn't mean that the acquisition of the book by an editor at a publishing house will be easy. By the way, sometimes it is. Sometimes people like Julie Chavez, who I interviewed several episodes ago about her book, Everyone But Myself, which is an incredible memoir, had a publishing house, got a publishing deal before she got an agent. And these are the sorts of things that I love to chat through with people because they're things that can happen and that do happen and that people don't realize happen. I hope you enjoy every second of this really fun episode with Diana. Do not miss her announcement about her own podcast that she has coming up. She actually took my podcast starter kit course. It's really more of a workshop over the weekend, and by this morning already had the thing up and going. So I think that's a lovely testament to the effectiveness of the podcast starter pack. She and I had a quick call this past Friday. She got the starter pack on Saturday. As of this morning, or actually after this interview today, and today is Monday, she emailed me and said, will you come on the podcast? I'm ready to go. It can be that fast, people. Anyway, she's a delight. I've got all of her info linked in the show notes. Any of the resources chatted about are in the show notes. Enjoy the interview. So I learned about you from the magnificent Neely Alexander.
Yes.
Come on. Who I mention all the time. And her latest book, In a Not So Perfect World, is now out. So if you're listening and you have not gotten it, go grab a copy right now because it's
fantastic.
It's so good. And we and I were chatting about something maybe a couple of months ago. And that was when she first mentioned you to me. And I'm trying to remember what the context was. And I don't remember. I'll have to ask her. But she said, oh my gosh, you know what I think it was? I think it was because Abraham Verghese, who I am obsessed with, not in a stalker way, but
I love that you're saying that. And I heard your interview with Zibby, and you were like, you're the only other person that has read like Cutting for Stone. I can't believe this that I know. And I was like, what? That is like the best book ever. And when I read that book 10 years ago, I was like, I looked at my husband and I said, I love this man and I hate this man. How could you be so good at medicine that you're able to be a doctor and so good at writing that you're able to create this world that is just like vivid and beautiful and like, it's not right. Like this is a Renaissance man and it's not right. It's not okay.
It's not okay at all. And so I had seen, or Neely had seen that Abraham was coming to our local bookstore, right? I told her, I said, I might embarrass you. Like this might be bad. I just want to let you know in advance. I don't think I'm going to do anything crazy, but I might, because I feel the exact same way you did. I learned about Cutting for Stone when we were in the adoption process, and someone had told me about it and said, it's set in Ethiopia, so you'd probably really enjoy it. And first of all, the book is fantastic. I fell so in love with his writing. I couldn't even see, and I didn't know anything about him. So then I went and I researched him and found out, like you just said, he's a practicing physician.
Oh my God.
Like an incredible human. I started following him everywhere, of course. I mean, not in real life.
He's so smart. He's so gentle. He's so kind. Yeah. All the things. So you want to hear it? So I know what Neely told you because I was on the other side of that. So you want to hear the story?
I sure do.
Okay. All right. So, obviously I knew Cutting for Stone. Obviously I already had known Abraham Verghese. Abraham Verghese is in the Department of Medicine at Stanford University, and I'm in the Department of Pediatrics. So we're not in the same department, but we're both in the School of Medicine. So it's like School of Medicine up here, two different departments. And so as I started this process and writing and this journey of learning, first of all, I had to learn how to write. And I did that after I wrote the first draft of the book. And I was like, crap, okay, it would be a better thing if I had learned how to write first. Took a ton of classes at continuing studies at Stanford. Highly recommend them. Got a lot of feedback from different people, had a lot of great instructors, figured out different things, like basic things. What is point of view? Should I write in the present tense or the past tense? And rewrote it 5 times, changing point of view, changing tense, changing fictionalized stuff, making it a memoir.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second and say it's memoir?
It is a memoir. Right? I wrote a memoir.
What was it that compelled you I'm thinking as a self-professed non-writer, since I love what you just said, you learned how to write after you had written the draft. What compelled you to think, I think I want to write this as a book?
So first, I didn't know I was writing a book, and I didn't know I was writing memoir. It was the pandemic, and like everybody, I was stuck at home. I also had just had a second kid, and an au pair that was living with us. So I had a lot of time you don't normally have a lot of time with a newborn, but like the baby was sleeping, the toddler was taken care of by the au pair. I was stuck at home. I was on maternity leave. And then when I transitioned back, I couldn't even go back in person. So I had like more hours than I normally do. So I started to write actually just stories that my father had told over the years that I found compelling stories. And he was this amazing storyteller. And he was charismatic. He was charming. He was funny. He always like wanted the laugh. Like he got the story and everybody's like, what? And then he'd like, just like get to that beat and that laugh. And so, however, he's not a very trustable narrator because he had bipolar disorder. And so a lot of the stories, we weren't sure if they were real, if they weren't, they were real to him, but you know, who knew if he actually flew or if he just thought he flew. And so I started to like that idea of cataloging his stories because I thought that they were interesting. So what I started to do was just call him, tell me a story. I would write it down. I would finesse it. It would kind of be like in a self-contained little essay. And then I'd read it back to him because he's practically illiterate and doesn't have the patience for a conversation longer than 5 minutes. But if he is the protagonist and I'm reading his stories, oh my God, he'll stay on there for hours. So I'd read it back to him and he'd say, no, it wasn't like that, Diana. I was like this. And then he'd like change it. It's like, okay, Dad, okay. So got all these stories down. And then I had maybe 12 different stories. And I thought, this would be so cool to piece together as a book. And I was actually thinking of magical realism. But I kind of thought as a psychologist and a Latina psychologist whose family is from Ecuador, that is magical realism actually magical realism, or do we actually all believe it? Because in Ecuador, we believe in ghosts. Ghosts are among us and curses happen. If you find behind you on the wall two little nails with some string in between them, yeah, you better look carefully.
I know.
Someone has put the evil eye on you. And and you need to go find it and take it out if bad things start to happen to you. Like people believe this, right? Okay. It's like part of the bread and butter of our family and our culture. So then I'm like, all this magical realism that people have written about in primarily like Latin American cultures, is it really, or is it like mental illness, or is it like shared belief? And I just like sort of saw the waters being very muddy in between those things and thought, how cool would it be to write about this and leave it a little open-ended? Like there was a scene when he called me and told me that he had saved someone from a burning bus, that the bus crashed in front of his store. He was a jeweler in downtown DC and he saved everybody and he was a hero. He was also very manic in that moment. And his voice, I was 12, he was like yelling into the phone. It was 2:00 in the morning and I was completely asleep in California. He's calling me from DC. He's like, oh, Diana, you should have seen me. It was amazing. I was so strong. I pulled the bus up and then I pulled people out and nobody else was helping. And like these morons were just, I'm like, okay, Dad. All right. Are you sure you're okay? Are you home? Yeah, I'm home. You're missing the point. Okay. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, did that happen? Was that a dream? Was it my dream? Did my dad dream it? Is he okay? I called his sister, his eldest sister, and my abuelita, my grandmother, to check on him. No, he's at home. He's fine. The 10 o'clock news comes on. He's on the news, this tiny little man who like rescued the whole bus.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. So these things like happen, but like his story is so grandiose. And so I kind of at the beginning left stories where the reader didn't know if it happened or if it didn't happen. And then as I was writing, I was like, my mom actually was asking, she's like, well, what about you? Like, didn't you experience him calling you? Didn't you worry about him? Like, weren't you in the story too? And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of was, but like, I don't want to write about that. So she's like, just try, just put it down. And I was like, okay. So I started to put myself in the book and I started to write about like my experiences of living with him. But I really didn't want it to be like a psychotherapist's guide on psychotherapy and like I hate heroine stories where like you get through all the bad things and then you become this really strong person. They're great. I'm glad. Good for you. But like, I don't want that. Like, I wanted this to be my crazy family. Okay. And yes, I had to survive, but there was so much love and so much laughter. And like, it's just sort of an N of one of this, this whole big crazy life. And my dad brought so much good to the world as well as all the crazy. And so I started to write myself in the book. And then I learned how to write. I changed everything when I realized that I wanted to fictionalize it, have a whole version that's fiction, all in the third person. Then I realized, oh my God, this is not my actual story. My story is my story. Changed it all back to first person. Went through present, went through past, and just landed on through some of these courses of like really understanding from a course called How to Publish Your Manuscript, understanding arc and storyline, and you want that build, and how does this fit in together? And so kind of rewrote again and moved things around. And then someone told me it can't be a memoir if it's not your memories. And I was like, oh, what? These are my dad's stories and they have to fit in this book. And so then it was like excruciating to try to change everything to make it sound like my dad was telling it to me. And then I was just like, I'm not doing that. I'm just not doing that. And people are like, you can't genre bend if you're a debut, author. And I was like, I'm not genre bending, but it will be assumed, just like it is in Glass Castle, that the stories came from her parents. Like there are snippets in there where she's telling about how they met. She wasn't there, but she knows because they have related this over and over. So at the beginning, I say, these are stories told hundreds of times. And that's why I know that the sky opened and there was a thunderstorm of hail and he saw, the devil incarnate in front of him, because he told me that. But I don't go through and say, he said, she said.
Got you.
I just kind of like in his stories, in his parts, everybody just knows this came from him. So that's where I went. So did all of that. And then I was like,
now what?
Oh my God. I don't just want to write this book for me. I want to actually share this book in the world. My dad actually was diagnosed with squamous cell carcinoma cancer about a year and a half into writing. And so I felt an urgency to get the stories straight from him and get them down and like complete this. And I did complete my manuscript and send it to my first query for my first agent the week he died, which I felt really good about. So I was able to tell him, like, I finished our story. I promise you I'm going to get this out. But I didn't have any idea how to do it. So I immediately said to everybody I know, who here knows people that have written and published books successfully? Hence, like reconnecting with Neely, who's a friend from in my 20s that is a friend of my best friend growing up, who's in my story, by the way, who hasn't read it. I'm like, you should read this because you're in it. But she's like, oh, my friend Neely published a book. And I was like, yeah, but like, I want to talk to like real authors. And she's like, no, like she really published a book. And I was like, is it a how-to? And she's like, no, like really like fiction. And I was like,
is there a heroine?
Yeah, like, so yes. So I connected to Neely and she's like, she gave me so many great tidbits about querying. She's the one who told me, listen, you query, and then if you get an offer, you go back to everybody you had already queried and you tell them, I got an offer, and then they have 2 weeks in order to respond back to you. And most often they haven't even looked at your stuff. So that like moves you to the top of the slush pile. She's like, also once you have an offer. So she gave me all of this like behind the scenes stuff. Yeah. And then I was like, this was so useful. Who else do I know that has written a book? And I just started to reach out to everybody that I knew. I cold emailed, I DM'd, I basically said, can I just talk to you about your journey of publishing? Like, can I just talk about what that was like for you? I tailored it depending on who the person was. For Abraham, I reached out and I said, hi, my name is Dr. Naranjo. I also work at Stanford and I'm in the School of Medicine. I have admired you for so long, but I just wanted to take you for a chat and a cup of coffee to hear about, how one professor at Stanford branched into writing and what that journey was like for you. I didn't hear back from him, of course. I love in your previous episode, you're like, when you don't hear back from people, don't ascribe any like self
meaning to it.
Yep. Like people are busy, people's dads die, people, whatever. Just keep trying. And so, I just kept trying. And then I started querying in October, in the middle of October. And then, of course, it was like 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Everybody shuts down. And it was, the Christmas break. Everybody shuts down, but I was still, of course, saying like, oh my God, I haven't heard back. And then January 2nd, I get an email from Abraham, and he's like, hey, I'm so sorry. I've been so slammed. And I actually get a lot of these requests, if you could probably imagine. And I have a boilerplate email that I send back that says, here are the things to consider. And please don't get no disrespect intended, but if you're okay with it, I'm going to give you that boilerplate. And also, I'd like to answer your specific questions because I do feel like we are both in the same School of Medicine, and
Sure.
It's a little bit different than just somebody that's random. So if I could be of help, that's great. However, I am really slammed, and maybe some of my questions are already answered in the boilerplate. If not, feel free to reach back out. The boilerplate was lovely, and it basically was like, you have to write a query letter, you have to have an agent, you're welcome to contact my agent. However, in all the years that I've recommended people, she's never taken anybody that I've sent her way. And all agents are incredibly busy, but that is a starting point. And then, and just little craft things like make sure, and then he said, he was funny. He's like, one thing you have that half or 3/4 of the people that don't have that contact me is you've actually written a book already. So you're winning. And I was like, great. And so simultaneously, the world converged, and I had just been accepted to a brand new Stanford fellowship. And Stanford Medicine has this whole medicine and humanities program, which is beautiful, for doctors that play cello and doctors that are, writers, doctors that are ballet. And so they're really trying to develop this medical humanities area. And they had just opened a Stanford Writing Medicine Fellowship. And I had already missed the deadline, but I reached out and I said, I'd really love to do this. This is so in line with what I'm trying to do and what I'm really getting a lot of joy from in my life. And so they accepted me, which was great. And who do you know?
So don't pay attention to deadlines.
Teacher. Yeah, right. Don't pay attention to deadlines
either necessarily.
Put your hat in the ring. Who was our first teacher? Abraham Verghese. And so I had just found that out, and I emailed him back and I was like, thank you so much. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I do have a million questions, but guess what? I got in this writing fellowship. You're our first teacher. I'll save my questions to when we are meeting together. But did you want me to wait to contact your agent, or were you going to contact your agent on my behalf? And he just quickly responded back, great, see you soon. You go ahead and contact my agent.
Okay.
So I emailed his agent, and within a few days, I got an offer of representation, which was so stressful because I didn't know, nobody prepared me for that part. I didn't know that.
Did you get the offer of representation just based off the query letter? I
sent the query letter. I obviously named Abraham, and I said, I'm a colleague of Abraham's, and he said I could go ahead and query you. But I also, I'm really passionate about this intersection between medicine and literature and writing. And then my query letter, and then she said, I'm very interested. Can you send me some more pages? And I sent some more pages. And then we had a call and I got the offer.
Okay.
And she was lovely, and she's amazing.
So you what's the word for simultaneous?
I simultaneously
submitted, right?
I submitted.
So it was Abraham's agent, and then there were some other agents that you also.
There were 18 agents. There were 18 agents. Girl, when I went to grad school, I applied to 20 places. When I went to undergrad, I applied to 25. I'm not taking my chances. For me, I researched where is it a good fit. I looked at a bunch of different similar memoirs that were recently published. I used those as my comps. I looked at where their agencies were. I tailored it specifically to agents. I took this like it was my dissertation. I'm like,
well, they say, Emma Gray, who wrote The Last Love Note, she has this rule of 100, and I don't think it's hers. I think she got it from someone else. And she says that when I spoke with her, but it's get 100 rejections, just plan on getting 100 rejections. So go 18. Great.
Yeah.
So Abraham's agent gave you an offer of representation, but then you had all these other queries still out. So
I had all these other queries still out. And I said, I really want to circle back because I had already submitted these and just make sure that they're closed out.
Sure.
And then this is different. So I don't know that this happens for everybody, but in the process of asking everybody I knew, do you know any writers? A good family friend who is like a school friend of my brother and sisters, they're adults now. And it's where my kids go to school. So there's like a strong school connection, the San Francisco school. One of the San Francisco school friends said, oh, I have a friend who's an author. I'm happy to get you in touch. So I got in touch with them. And that person said, I actually published with an imprint that accepts unagented solicitations. Mm-hmm. If you have anything to do with X, Y, and Z, I'm happy to make an introduction. If that's not your genre or not your voice or not your area, then it would be a moot point. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I do. And I did. I fit the thing. Okay. I'm not going to tell you which imprint, and I'm not going to tell you
that's fine. That's fine.
But so I fit the thing. And so she said, let me make an introduction. Okay. That editor, who was the VP and acquiring editor of the imprint, was like, I would love to have a discussion. And we had a lovely discussion. And it was a cross between, let me tell you a little bit about me and let me just learn everything I can about the business. And she was very, gave a lot of mentoring advice and just a lot of, this is how it works kind of thing. Very lovely person. And she said, are you interested in me taking a look at this unagented? I hadn't sent her the actual writing, just the query letter. I hadn't sent the book. And I said, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. And she said, okay, that's a fair response. I think that you would work really, really well with this other agent who I've worked with in the past, but you also have a number of agents at your disposal that you've already reached out to. And so it was right in that same time that I got the offer. And then I had this recommendation of an agent from a publisher. And here's what she said at the end of the call, which was so lovely. She said, and you go ahead and feel free when you tell all your agents that you got an offer of representation, that you also have interest from a publisher, and you'll see that they're going to email you back pretty quickly. And I was like, what? I have permission to say that? She's like, yeah, absolutely. You have editorial interest.
To use your word, what a lovely human being.
What a lovely human being. Yes. And I was like, oh my God, even if this is just playing the game, wow, that's amazing.
This is how we want to play.
Right. And I would never have said that from a random phone call of a friend of a friend, sure. But because she gave me permission, I was like, absolutely, I'll say that. So then when I had editorial interest, quote unquote, I did get about 50% responded back, and many of them were the beautiful, lovely. If you guys are querying, you guys know, oh, this is fantastic. You have such a wonderful voice, and I'll stand aside. Or I can't wait to see you on the shelves, and this isn't really my genre, so I'll step aside. And all this different, beautiful versions of no thank you. That they must all communicate with each other, that they all think they'll step aside. And I was like, no, step in. I don't want you to step aside. And then I got another offer from one of my friends, another school mom's friends, my friend from school, her agent. And her agent was just really excited, really lovely, and seemed to represent a lot of different types of genres. I already knew that I wanted to write something that was fictional later. And I already was kind of thinking, if I ended up in an editor's portfolio that only does nonfiction, I'm not sure how well received fiction would be. And I would love in an ideal world to have a long-standing relationship with an editor. But any editors out there, you go ahead. If you're only interested in memoir, you can hit me up. I won't say no. So, but I ended up going with that agent. And
if you're a boy mom, listen up. Curated confidence for tween and teen boys has arrived. Guygene is a brand new bundle of joy that lets you equip your young guy with a monthly box of confidence that introduces cool personal hygiene swag from top brands developed just for teen and tween boys. Founded by fellow boy mom Cara Forney, who also happens to be the author of Boy Moms, Collective Tales of Mothers and Sons, each box contains 4 to 6 personal care items based on a different hygiene theme. Each box contains more than just cool products. With Guygene's wellness message, giving back spirit, and brilliant partner companies, they're all in for supporting the whole journey of teen and tween boys every step of the way. And, bonus, all products are toxin-free, cruelty-free, and backed by, science. You can get 10% off your first box, and you can combine it with the free shipping offer they have running right now. Just use code WriteTheDamnBook at checkout. Visit goodguygene.com, that's GOODGUYGINE.com, and enter code WriteTheDamnBook for 10% off and free shipping. Set the stage for lifelong healthy hygiene habits and put him, not you, in the driver's seat when it comes to choosing products he's excited to use every day. Link is also in the show notes for easy reference later on. And now back to the show.
Had a number of others that said, I need more time, but my 2 weeks had already expired. And so I just said, just letting you know, I did actually accept an offer of representation. I felt like that was the right thing to do instead of continuing on the search when I felt like there was a good fit.
Okay. So now to bring the story full to the present moment, you have representation. Yes.
I have representation. We're on submission, first round of submission. I'm getting tons of feedback everywhere that Memoir is incredibly hard to sell. Nobody wants Memoir from people that aren't famous already. Right. How many subscribers do you have? TikTok artists apparently sell great Memoir. And I'm like, but who wants to read that? Right. So you can feel free to cut that if you want or don't. Oh, I stand by my word.
Because it's not because it's true, right? So the whole TikTok thing, and we will not go down this path because we'll be here all day, but it's interesting because they're starting their own imprint. I don't know if you've heard this.
Are they? Oh my God, yes. I didn't hear about this.
So it was very interesting because in 2023, really, maybe more toward the latter half of 2022, there were so many books that shot up the charts, all thanks to TikTok popularity, right? Mm-hmm. And it was book talk, right? It's mostly fiction and a lot in the fantasy space or the fantasy romance space.
Romantasy.
But romantasy. But that's what happened. And so the thought was, or the prediction was, that a lot of the traditional houses, the big traditional houses, because now we can say traditional, when we say traditional, we don't just mean big five, but lots of times that's what people hear as big five. Mm-hmm. But any really big house would want to create partnerships with some of these influencers on TikTok who have amassed these huge followings and gotten so many books to move. But that didn't happen. So then I think TikTok, I don't know, right? I'm not in these meetings, but I think some of the TikTok bigwigs thought, well, wait a minute. So yeah, the rumor is
they've got something marketable. And I absolutely respect TikTok artists. My brother is a TikTok artist. I am compelled as a Stanford professor to put on my, please publish me. I have a little brother who's a TikTok artist. Like he has millions of followers. Right. I promise he'll promote me. But yeah, no, I'm trying to stand on my own merit, my own credit, my own person. And I don't want to change who I am just to get a book published. So that's why I started thinking about platform, and I started thinking about, how does one grow one's platform if one does not want to just become an Instagram star? By the which, I can't with my day job. I can't actually.
Well, that's the thing.
A clinical psychologist that does research at Stanford and posts, everything that I'm eating for breakfast. I can't do that.
Well, I think that's why it's so important, though, for people to take into account not just what they want to do, but what they can do, right? I was talking to Elle Evans, who first novel, Wedding Issues, I think just came out 5 days ago. It's a Zibby Books book. She's an anesthesiologist. So Elle Evans is a pseudonym because when people Google her government name, they're going to find all of her research papers on anesthesiology, and she does not want them to be confused that she's written a rom-com along with I don't know what you write about anesthesia, what that sort
Right.
of
Yeah.
thing, right?
Right. Like I'm like, is it going to help publishers to name that I have 150 first authored publications and manuscripts in the world? No, because they're
Right.
all on diabetes and clinical
Right.
psychology. Like, but I feel like it should, because I can carry something through from start to end. Like I have drive, I have perseverance. Like
Oh
I'm
my
in a
gosh,
competitive
that
industry. I
aspect,
write like,
yes,
but no,
that
it doesn't
aspect of it all
transfer.
day. But that actually raises a really interesting point, because there's would you agree that there's a big difference between writing academic papers and medical papers and then writing a book, even when it's memoir? I mean, I've talked to numbers of people who are journalists
Yes.
or have a journalistic day job, and they're like, no, writing a book is totally different.
Here's the things here. I've thought a lot about this, because here are the things that I think are different. Learning how to do point of view. Like we only write from the third person. We only write about ourselves as if we're not there. The research study found that like we're not in the story.
Right.
Although in my medical faculty fellowship, we're talking a lot about how to write a good, what's it called? As a clinician writing that there's a term
Okay.
for it, but that you really should put yourself in the story, because that's what sells in journalism.
Like I'm not just the founder, I'm also a client, that sort of
right. Or like, I'm like in telling a human story and getting away from just telling a scientific story when we're trying to write for the public to enjoy and get a message across. So, but here are the things that are the same. So like the writing style is different. Mm-hmm. Sort of the point is different. Writing is still writing, and having to finish a project is still having to finish a project. I do the same things in both jobs of procrastination until the night before, and then I need the adrenaline rush, and then I'm like, and I can write really quickly. Yeah. Organization is so huge. And I've been I've been around hundreds of other writers from every stage and every phase. And there are things that you can't teach that I already just have in my job. Like when you gave that presentation and you were like, okay, here's how you should file your things so that you don't lose them. I'm like, oh, I already had all my files. Everything's in a separate file. People will ask me like, well, how do you find your latest draft? And I'm like horrified, like, what? Because like I do that for my day job.
Folder, manuscripts, drafts, draft 3.
Yeah, version 3, dated, like the moon and the stars and the sun and the alignment, and whether it was a Gemini or like the Capricorn is rising. Oh, I think we're actually missing the
eclipse. Oh, we had it earlier. It really wasn't remarkable.
But so I think that those like kind of organizational skills apply. And also, and I was trying to do this, and I don't know how far it will go in the sale to a publisher, editor. We're just very comfortable talking in front of people. I do that for my day job. I go around the world and do presentations in front of a big room of people and try to captivate them with a point and hopefully not put them to sleep. And I feel like that's a transferable skill for authors and that sort of fiction or nonfiction presence.
I want to take a super quick break to ask you, have you ever wondered where authors get great professional mock-ups of their books without spending hours on Photoshop or hiring a designer? In less than 10 seconds, Mockup Shots puts your book into over 1,200 amazing settings. And now, for a limited time, they are including their exclusive video mock-up system. Mockup Shots is what I've used for years to create 3D mock-ups of my own book covers and my author's book covers, as well as professional attention-grabbing images that are great for social media. No technical know-how required. Mockup Shots usually costs over $200, but I have a special offer for you. It's faster, has more features, more images, and is getting better every day. They're celebrating this new and improved Mockup Shots by offering a 60% discount on lifetime access with lifetime updates. It's a great way to get an unheard of price on a product that will get eyes on your book, increased sales, and that you will end up using all the time. You can get this limited time offer with the link in the show notes. And now back to regularly scheduled programming. I think it's one of the biggest challenges for many authors is that it's such a creative, introverted, do-it-yourself thing.
Yeah.
that a lot of those people, a lot of authors are like that. They don't have a front-facing job outside of being an author. And even if they do, they're comfortable talking to people about other things.
Something that they're an expert in, right?
Exactly. But when it gets to talking about yourself or your very first book, even if it's a novel, even if it's fiction, and it's not about you per se, it's this imposter syndrome creeps in, and you're either comfortable talking in front of groups or you aren't. And sometimes you don't know until you're standing in front of said group. Yeah.
And I think that imposter syndrome is something that we share with writers in academia. We all have it all the time, especially women in science. We all have it all the time. And I feel it in writing as well. But something that you brought up resonated with, I have given, I don't know how many talks about many different things. Some are super boring, like the very specific ways in which technology uptake is received by pediatric children with cystic fibrosis and type 1 diabetes. But I've also given interesting talks to families on, how to deal with like conduct that you don't want in your children. And I can make it interesting and personal. I have never given a talk about being a writer. And I've also never called myself a writer in a public space. And so our kids' school had their annual gala thing, and it was I don't know how to say this word, I'm going to say it terribly, pechakucha. I know online they call it pechakucha. That sounds like a sneeze, so pechakucha. So they had this pechakucha, and it was the same day that I got an offer of representation, and I was like, I'm going to submit a pechakucha about my journey as a writer. Oh my God, I got chosen, and I had so much regret the 6 weeks later when I had to actually make a presentation and talk as a writer. I was like, why did I sign up for this? I thought I was on the I thought I was already on the carnival ride up and celebrating, and I didn't realize I was going to get all these rejections by editors and publishers, and it may never get published. But I did it, and it was 6.5 minutes. And I had to have 20 slides and 20 seconds on each slide. And I had to create an arc that felt like a story. And I used all the writing skills to do that. And I stood up there, and I have never felt so nervous in my life. Yeah. And I kept saying, I talk to many more people than this that are really smart and kind of judgy in academia all the time. Like, why is this so scary when this community is loving and supportive and so proud of me and wants to hear my success? And I stuttered, my voice was shaky.
You can feel it in your throat, like everything goes dry. Okay, I'm sorry, but what is a pechakucha? However you want to say it, what is that?
A pechakucha is this, it's the Japanese word is translated as chit-chat. And in Japan, 2 architects created this.
Are you telling me the word pechakucha is Japanese?
Yeah.
Because my undergrad of all things is in Japanese, and I have never, ever heard this word.
Google this after. So it's apparently the Japanese word for chit chat, and 2 Japanese architects created this thing, and it's like a way of presenting. And now you can go down the pechakucha rabbit hole and look up all these people's pechakuchas. And now I think over 1,500 different presentations have been made in pechakucha across 120 countries. And basically,
is it like the new TED Talk or something?
It's like a TED Talk. It's like 20 slides. Only 20 slides. And the slides are not supposed to be composite or multiple. It's supposed to be like 1 image per slide, 20 seconds per slide, 20 slides, and you tell a story. And all the speakers at an event need to tell the same theme. And so our theme was Roads to Joy. And so we had 8 different speakers with all kinds of different life experiences talking. One was a graffiti artist. One was my brother, which was so sweet because he works at my kid's school. And my brother started dressing in, traditionally known feminine clothing, and had this whole path to joy of creativity and discovery. And I was this TikTok artist. And mine was finding joy in the diagnosis of cancer and eventual death of my dad through the writing. And so it was like finding connection and joy. And then finding this incredible new experience of learning, which I feel like as adults, we don't do enough. We do not learn new things. Really learn new things where you are diving headfirst into an entirely different realm or industry, or getting excited the way you felt like, I don't know, when I used to buy pencils and like notebooks at the beginning of the school year. And I was like, oh, I
Yes.
can't wait to know like what I'm going to learn
My
this year.
trapper keeper.
Oh my God. I haven't had that feeling in a long time, even though I
Yeah.
work in academia and I'm, quote unquote, learning new things all the time. So it was that road to joy. And it was the first time that I spoke publicly about writing and called myself a writer. And it was horrifyingly frightening, but I did it. And I had good.
It's hard for a lot of people to call themselves, and sometimes there's the debate between, once you're published, your book is published, do you call yourself a writer or an author? So when people ask me what I do, my answer is 99% of the time, I just say I'm a writer. And then 99% of the time they go, oh, what do you write?
And then you're like, oh God.
I've just gotten used to it, I think. But I hear that really, truly all the time. Like, I feel weird calling myself, this is what other people say, I feel weird calling myself a writer. Like, am I really a writer? Like, what qualifies someone to be a writer? And I think you're writing. Are you writing?
You're writing. Exactly.
Right? Like
right.
What qualifies someone to say, I'm a creative person? You feel creative at times.
You create.
There's no
you
gotta have a degree to say I'm a clinical psychologist, right? But
yes, you do.
Yeah.
And so I actually stepped into it and like made a frenemy, an enemy, unknowingly because of my own internal hangups. And it was a book club and she was presenting and she was a friend of the book club person and she's an author and she was presenting her memoir. And I was so excited to like see someone else with a debut memoir that had kind of like a interesting story with, a lot of family immigration and stressors. And I was just like, oh my God, I was relating so hard and fangirling so hard. And I was so excited. And then I said, at what point, like, did you consider yourself a writer? And she like stopped and she was like, I've always been a writer. Like, I am a writer. And I think I offended her, but it was really from my own insecurity. Cause I was like, I don't know at what point to even like say to someone I'm writing, much less I'm a writer.
Right.
And I felt proud of her for being like, oh no, you own that. Like, you are a writer, like, go girl. But like, I think I offended her.
But isn't that interesting how she it almost feels like through you as though she felt defensive. I mean, obviously we have no idea what she felt, but humans, we're weird. We are just, I don't know how we're making it through day to day. Really. I don't know anyone stays in relationship.
So also you bring up a funny thing, which, we chatted a little about, and now I'm on a complete and utter deep dive into is I started thinking about this whole thing about like platform. Oh my God. Yeah. If I have to like tell you what kind of cereal I eat in the morning as a platform, like we're going to all be very, very bored because it's not very good cereal. And so I'm like,
and someone will judge it, by the way. You'll get a lot
for sure. Like,
get a lot of comments
trolls about the cereal. Oh my God.
Right. Like
too much sugar, too little sugar. She's too healthy. So I'm not doing that. But I started thinking and I'm like, there's so many writers and we're all being told the same thing. Like, you need this platform, but what do I actually want to do? Like, what do I want more of? I like learning. I like talking to people. What skills do I have that other people don't? Clearly not cereal eating at all. Or good photos, as my brother is texting me right now and I'm seeing on my screen and he's laughing at all the photos I took of myself to try to do some promotional videoing kind of thing. Yeah. So what do I have a skill of? I'm a psychologist. I'm interested in writing. I'm interested in reading, and I'm interested in talking to people. And so I am starting a podcast, putting it out there. And
it's so brilliant. Will you say what it's about, please?
Yes,
because I almost lost my mind in the parking lot of Coffee Builders in downtown Phoenix, which if you have not, I am not yet a spokesperson, notice the yet, for Coffee Builders. It is the greatest coffee shop ever. And I was on the phone with you in the parking lot, pacing along the curb. And then you told me this idea and I was like, I need you to launch that yesterday.
I'm so excited. So this was Thursday, everybody. This was Thursday. And now today we're Monday. I have already taken Elizabeth Lyons' course on how to develop a podcast. I have subscribed to all of the things she said to subscribe to. I didn't know what Canva was yesterday. Now I'm like a Canva goddess.
You know what Canva? Sometimes I feel so bad being like, listen, Canva, because I'm afraid that people, this is my own insecurity. I'm afraid people are going to be like, duh. And so
No,
anytime someone
never
says,
heard of
I have
Canva.
never heard of Canva, I
Oh my
honestly
God.
feel like I've just blessed them
You
in
have
ways
just like
that you
changed
don't
my
even know
life.
yet.
I have never heard of Canva. I don't even know. I barely know where to get a podcast, but now I'm like all deep into, do I want to do this on Zoom, which is free for me at Stanford, or do I need to have like dual things where anyway.
We're on
Okay,
Zoom
so
right now. We've got dual things.
we're going to do it. So
Yeah.
starting a podcast is called The Characterist, which is a therapist for your characters. So it's real therapy, fictional characters. And I'm going to let authors bring their character of their choosing. It could be someone that you have known and loved. It could be someone that you want to hear a backstory for that was like an ancillary character, not the main character. It could be your favorite author that's trying to work out a new character, and they really want to try to develop this character and make it like, you know, very real and 360 degrees. You could be hearing about generational trauma like 3 decades ago for someone that you know and love. Or I think this one's really exciting, authors out there. If you want to bring your character to therapy after the plot ends, like after the book is over and something new has happened 5 years later, we can do that. So whenever the author chooses to start their therapy for their character, we're going to be filming and we're going to be listening. And I'm not even going to like say that only book characters. If we like movie characters too, or we like TV characters.
So and you've already promised me, I'm making this up because it's a story I made up in my head, that I can be one of your first 5 guests.
Absolutely.
Because I realized, and I was thinking about it yesterday, I was driving down the road because my main character in my novel that I'm working on, her name is Hallie. And I was realizing Hallie doesn't even have a last name. And
oh my God.
Yeah, like what does that say, right? And I told you on the call that Neely's my critique person, and so she was reading my first chapter, which she's read 7,000 times because I can't get it right. And there's a Ferris wheel, and she keeps saying, I don't understand the Ferris wheel. And I keep saying, it's a metaphor. And so now I'm trying to understand, like, why would I not give my main character, like, I don't know if my main character needs therapy or I need therapy, but it might be both.
Okay. So maybe, and I'm gonna like figure out an entertainment lawyer to try to draw up some papers that explicitly states the author is not my patient. Only the character is my client. But I'm super excited about it. I already have 2 people, and now you're my 3rd invited onto the show. And it's going to be a lot of fun. In fact,
brilliant.
I'm going to make you fill out an intake evaluation the way I would a patient. And so I'm going to send it to you. You're going to have it in advance. You're going to have to figure out like their date of birth and what date they're coming into therapy. You're going to have to figure out where they live, what their like specified problem is that you're trying to work out. So it'll be a lot of fun. And I think that it will be really fun for people that don't understand therapy and are interested in psychology. I think it'll be fun for book lovers. I think it'll be awesome for authors to actually get a service to go deeper on some of these characters that you think you know.
I hope you're prepared.
And you know like, Abraham Verghese is going to be on the show. So.
And he can go before me. He and Neely can both go before me, but I feel like nobody else can. They're the only people who I will give permission to go.
Oh my God. Can you imagine me pitching him right now? I'll be like, hey, thank you so much for that awesome like conversation and those like email tidbits. So now I want you to bring Muffy onto the show.
Oh my God. Okay. So the book itself, you're on submission. Real quick. This is not my last question, but it's going to be my second to last question. Because there was so much, what I thought was so interesting was there was so much initial hype, right? So agents, not just Abraham's agent, but other agents were, the unagented submission, like people are really intrigued by this concept. And I could see where you or anyone would be like, okay, we are made in the shade. Like we are good to go. And now you're kind of discovering we're in the second phase of this whole thing where we've invited a whole new group of people, i.e. acquisitions editors, to say, it's not for us, or Memoir's hard, or so where are you at with that? And how are you navigating?
11, I've submitted to 11 publishers, 4 of which have passed and waiting to hear back on the others. I have a call on Friday with an acquiring editor. And I don't know what that call will be like. I think that it's safe to say that everybody's a little just like hesitant around memoir, especially for people without big platforms. But I also think that the right person and the right fit will really back this. And I was actually just listening to your episode and I looked up who the woman about tough titties, like who her editor was.
Laura Belgrade.
They might have like this is in a similar vein of, nope, this is what I want to write. I know everybody wants me to write the book I should, which is being a therapist and how being a therapist and having a father that had bipolar played out. And let me tell you some tips for dealing with your mentally ill parent. And like, that's not the book that I'm going to write.
Yes. I loved that conversation with Laura so much because first of all, she's just as honest as the day is long, but she was like, I didn't want to write that book. Not about her topic would have been different. It would have been copywriting, but that was the should book. That was the book that, would have had no editor.
I resonated so much with that.
Well, because her platform
is the should book,
right? But she was like, that's not what, and it's funny because she got the agent and the editor who were willing to take the risk. It's like, I always think about all the people who said no to Dr. Seuss, all the people who said no to Harry Potter, controversial as Harry Potter and the author may be, right? Just from a purely standpoint,
business.
Right? Like, can you imagine being, and hopefully some of those agents are like, well, you win some, you lose some. But I think there are some who are really kicking themselves because perhaps they thought it really was a great idea, but they just were afraid. And so you're looking for what Laura found, which was the editor, in her case, the agent and the editor who said, this girl, I don't care what you should write. This is great. Right. Exactly. She's got everyone at the title, for God's sake. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's all you're waiting on.
That's what I'm waiting on. And I know that you're going to ask me, what am I reading? Right.
Oh my
God. I'm a listener. I'm telling you, didn't know about this podcast last week. And now
normally I have to write it down. So that's my last question. What are you reading?
Yes, I am reading, I'm reading Tell Me Everything, the story of a private investigation.
Oh.
It's so interesting. Anyway, it's Memoir Plus. So that is like this person's experience of becoming a private investigator and also about a class action lawsuit against a university for not protecting women. And it was after a football player team incident of rape. And it's beautifully written. Erica Krause is also agented by Abraham's agent. And we got connected because I was talking to clients of the different agents, and she was just lovely. And I thought, you know what? I want to hear her voice, and it's great. Highly recommend
So now
it.
I'm going to add that to the stack. I really, when I started asking people this, I didn't recognize that I was doing myself sort of a service/disservice. And now I'm a big fan of all the Instagram memes that say things like, books it's not a to be read pile. They have all these romantic ways of describing, if you're a hoarder of books, essentially.
Don't be the editor or the agent that said, I'm just going to step aside to your books. Don't be like, books. Oh, my book's in waiting. I'm just going to step aside. I'm sure someone will read you.
It's so bad. Like I know you can't see what I'm looking at, but I have this whole bookshelf on my wall over here and I have them organized by color, but even by color, I want them to be next to, like, I'm very clear, like Neely is next to Meg Tatey, who is next to Tanmeet.
Hoover.
I want them to, I'm a weirdo, right?
I get it. I totally get it.
I just lost a few listeners and gained a few.
My Philly, we have a house in Philadelphia because that's where everybody summers, right? And so that's a long story, but I have a library in that house. It's 300 years old and it's wild. And I did the color thing, but now I can't find a single book that I want to read. And so now I've decided I'm going to do an Excel and I'm going to have a catalog, and I'm going to have also like which shelf it's on in my catalog. Because I have all the time in the world.
You're like the Monica Geller of books. Like she did it with photographs. It was like,
absolutely,
this category, this. Sometimes I think, well, should I alphabetize them by author? I mean, I get really frustrated in bookstores because I can't find, I'm always looking for my friends' books in bookstores because I want them to be there, and then I want to pull them so they're front facing instead of spine facing. And then it's
put them up in the front.
The whole thing. I wreck the whole thing, but not for the authors, but for the store. But I'm like, well, are they going to be in romance or are they going to be in fiction? Like, where does the store think they belong? Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.